Let's do some more refactoring. I started to write a little console application that should display the current time and some time zone information. And the reason I'm doing that is to get familiar with the problem and also to try out some Java features that I didn't have a chance yet to use in real client projects. I started to implement this application using test-driven development, but there were some design decisions that I deferred until I had a working skeleton. Now I have this walking skeleton and now I'm rethinking those decisions. In my last video, I inverted some dependency and cleaned up a class so that it is more cohesive. And today I want to continue refactoring this walking skeleton. Hello, my name is David and I've started my career as a professional software developer and architect almost 2 decades ago. And in the last few years I did also more and more trainings and technical agile coaching where I'm helping my clients to create better software faster and more efficiently. So here's the application again, and you can see all the tests are green right now, and I just want to quickly start it if you missed the last video so that you can see what it does right now. It displays the current time zone and the current time, and later it should display the current time in multiple time zones. One of the problems here is that it doesn't really react to changes in the window size yet. So here this black bar is because of that. That's a feature that's still missing. As I've said, it's just a walking skeleton. And in the last video, I worked on inverting this dependency of the wall clock, and this is inverted now. So the wall clock drives the model controller, which creates a model that contains the current time, the user's time zone, and all the other time zones that should be displayed. And so it passes this model on to a display model controller, which creates something like a display model and passes it on to more processing. So what we have here is some staged processing or staged architecture where each stage adds more information to the previous model until we can display it directly to the terminal using Lanterna. If you don't already know it, Lanterna is a Java library that allows us to create terminal applications using Java. Right now, I'm not super happy with this name here and all the other names that follow, so I want to change that later. But today I want to work on making it clearer that this is a staged architecture. Like everything we have here, like the model controller, the display model controller, and whatever comes afterwards are stages in some staged processing. And we can make that clearer by adding some interfaces and by changing the code a little bit. But before I do that, there's one more thing that I can do to clean up my refactoring from the last video. After I stopped recording, I recognized that since we inverted the dependency between the clock and the model controller, we can now simplify the model controller test a little bit. Because as you can see here, the model controller does not need the clock anymore. We inverted this dependency so we can get rid of the clock completely. So I'm going to start by simplifying this create controller method. And I think if I can simplify it enough, then I can even inline it into all the tests again. And since I was not super happy with it anyway, that would be a good thing for now. So I'm going to replace this one with a lambda right here. And now I'm just going to remove this update for now, which just removing it would break the tests. So before I'm going to remove it, I will call controller.update with clock.now, which is the instant that the controller gets right now. The tests are still green. Now it gets updated twice. Now I can remove this. And the tests are still green. Does that already help us? Not yet. But I can now extract a parameter from clock.now. And you can see IntelliJ already removed the clock because we don't need it anymore here. The tests are still green. And now I think I'm gonna already inline this function into all of my tests. So I want to inline this method. I want to inline all usages and remove the method. This is okay. This should still have no effect on the test. And now I can start at the top and remove the clock everywhere. So here we have instant.now. And one nice side effect from this change that you can see here now is that it makes the arrange, act, and assert clearer in the test. We have now 3 lines arrange, 1 act, and 2 assert. So what do we do with the expected time zone here? Yes, this test should break now because here it must pass the expected time zone. And I just found a problem with this test. Let's fix it later. I first want to change all the tests and remove the clock. But I'm gonna remember this with fail. Yes, and let's disable it for now. And now let's go back to this test that isn't working anymore. I now want to make this test red in a way so that this assertion fails. So let's use any other time zone like Europe London. And now we have the assertion fail. So here you can see expected was Europe London, actual was Europe Vienna. Now I can remove this fail here because the assertion fails with a reasonable error message. And now I can pass in this here. And all tests are green again, and we fixed this one test. Let me quickly commit this, and then we go on to the next refactoring. I'm back at the code, and I've said that this wall clock here starts some staged processing or staged rendering. So to make that clearer, I want to create an interface here that is not a consumer of instant, but it's a rendering stage. So let's start with that. So I'm gonna add the interface rendering stage. And I'm now going to say that this gets a type parameter and it extends consumer of t. So that's a very small change. So I can use a rendering stage here now. So that doesn't change anything yet, but now I want to rename this accept method to update, because every rendering stage updates the next stage. So update is a more appropriate name here than accept. So let's go back to the rendering stage and override this. Accept. This still doesn't change anything. Now I can remove the consumer. This is a very slow way to do it, but it's also a very safe way to do it. What I have achieved here now is, I can remove this. What I have achieved here now is that I have an interface that is completely compatible, and but that I now can rename. I did it over 3 steps. I could have done it in one bigger step, but this is the safer way in general, especially if I had multiple implementations of this interface or anything. So here I can now rename this to update. And we're basically done. Now I have my rendering stage interface. And what I can do with that is I can simplify the code that wires up the whole application. When you look at this, we were here passing a lambda that calls the update method of the controller. But now I can just make the model controller implement rendering stage of instant. And then I can add the missing override here. This still doesn't change anything. And now I can pass the controller here. And this makes it a little bit clearer that the clock is the first stage and it passes on the current time to the next stage, which is the controller. Would it make it more clearer if we did it like that? Maybe. Let's leave it like that for now. I'm gonna commit quickly and then we can move on, also making all the other stages instances of rendering stage. Now we have the model controller, and it passes on the model to a display model controller, which is an interface, and it has a concrete implementation. But what I really want to do here is to write something like rendering stage of model here instead of display model controller. So let's look here. This already has an update method. So I can just say extends rendering stage of model. And this overrides. Now we can see here this hasn't changed anything yet. But since this is already a rendering stage, I can use rendering stage of model here. And of course also here. This shouldn't change anything yet. Now I can rename this to something like model renderer. And I also want to change this parameter. And yeah, this one looks good to me right now. So now we should try to get rid of this display model controller interface here. And the one class that implements it is the terminal display model controller, which also has a pretty bad name. I'm not happy with this name, but let's first focus on the changing the interfaces. So this is a rendering stage of model, which does change something, because here this is now a rendering stage of model. And now this interface still has one usage. Or does it? Was it just an import? Now it doesn't have any usages anymore, and now I can delete it. So now this is a rendering stage 2, and we can call this here to model renderer. Now here we are at the terminal display model controller, and this one updates something like a display, but it doesn't really have a model yet. So let's also create a model here. And this one is we said this one can be a record. Then we can use it here. Pass in the user time zone. Add this as the second parameter. And the default value here is new terminal display model of create user time zone. Yes, now all the tests are green. And now I can try to remove this first parameter here. So let's try to save delete this. You can see here that we cannot simply do it. So to be able to delete this parameter, we first have to change the code that uses it, which is, of course, what we should have expected, or what I have expected. So here in the terminal display, I can first use here display model .userTimeZone.content. Now this user time zone is not used anymore, and let's try to save delete it again. We have another usage in a test in the terminal display model controller test, where here we can use display model user time zone. Now I want to try to save delete it again. And this one is okay. So refactor anyway. And now here I have to fix the compiler errors by hand, but it's only in this one test file. So this is okay for me right now. Now trying to run the tests again, and all the tests are green. So the next thing here is to say that this display is a rendering stage. Of terminal display model. then I can override it here. Why does this have related problems? There is no problem here. Interesting. That's funny. The related problems here are not true. Yeah, and now I can search for usages here. Let's just change all of them to rendering stage. The tests are still green. So back to my references. Here we have a display, which is a rendering stage of terminal display model. And let's also call this one. Is this already unused? No. I can replace this one with a lambda. And then remove the implements here. Or not remove it. Change it to rendering stage of terminal display model. The tests are still green. And now I can hopefully remove the display class. We still have one usage. Yes. Save deleted. And the tests are still green. So there's one more thing here, the terminal display. So here we have one last class that is slightly different. The terminal display renders to a display screen, and the display screen gets some object that encapsulates render operations. So this is not a model, this is really an object that encapsulates how to render it. But I think we should also change this display screen to a rendering stage. So the first thing here would be to call this function update. And then we can make display screen implement render operation, rendering stage. Oh no, extend. And it's a screen renderer that it gets. Then we can create an override here. Now we have two related problems, and I think this is a false positive again. Let's just try to run the tests. Yes. So IntelliJ, you're wrong here. All right, now we have a rendering stage here. So let's see where this display screen is used and change all of the usages to a rendering stage. I think I can copy it from here. That will make it a little bit faster to change all the usages. Okay, here's something that I just didn't think of. We still need the display. I still need the display interface, display screen interface, because it also provides the width and height of the screen. I'm not 100% sure if this is a good design, but let's keep this interface for now and make it extend display screen just as we had it before. So also here we can undo that and keep display screen, but maybe we can clean up some other stuff. So I've said that here we still need the display screen, but the terminal display does not use width and height, and this one should implement display screen. And the test display screen should also implement display screen. So I've said the reason I did this is to make it clearer that the display screen is also a rendering stage. So let's just rename the variable here. This has nothing to do with the correctness of the program. It's just to make the code a little bit clearer. And we call this just the screen renderer. This is the screen. And now we can use screen renderer here. And now this is our staged architecture. The clock passes stuff on to the controller to the model renderer to the terminal display model renderer to the screen renderer. But there's two more problems I have with that. The first is that the order of parameters is not consistent here, and the second is that the order of rendering operations is not clear here. But I think this is something for another video. So today I simplified the test for the model controller, which was made possible by my last refactoring, where I changed the dependency between model controller and the wall clock, and now I was able to simplify the test. And then I tried to make it clearer that this is a staged rendering architecture where every stage adds more information to the model it got from the previous stage. It is not completely done yet, but I think I've made progress. But what do you think about my approach here? Do you think it made the code clearer, or do you see any other improvements, or do you think it made it worse? Please tell me in the comments, and also tell me what you would have done differently or what you would have done in addition to what I did. My name is David. You can find me on social media, and I'll link my social media profiles and also my email address below in case you want to contact me. And I hope to see you next time when I continue refactoring this problem. I also have another video series here where I talk about general topics of software development while I work on my bonsai trees and pre-bonsai projects. So until next time, happy coding!